Happy Friday and welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk about adulting challenge, one of the biggest challenges that we have as adults, which is decision making, and something that we have to do all the time, be it what to have for breakfast or dinner, or much bigger decisions like which college to go to, who to get married to, where to live, where to work. Decisions are something that we cannot really avoid in life, and yet making those decisions adds so much stress in our lives. So, how do we navigate that? As kids, life was much simpler because we didn't have to make any decisions. Our parents were making all the decisions for us. And in a very subtle way, if things didn't go right, in retrospect, when you look back at your childhood and something didn't go right, you can always blame somebody else, right? But as an adult, when you're making decisions, there isn't anybody else that you can blame. You have to take responsibility for those decisions. So it became a little bit more clear to me this week, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a big decision or a small decision, we have the same tendency. So this week, we were actually thinking of visiting some family and friends. And it was a long weekend. We thought it'd be really nice to get away from the city, hang out, spend some time. And we kept going back and forth between the schedules and, does it make sense for everybody? Doesn't make sense for everybody. And of course, as that happens, schedules start getting packed up and things start coming up. And literally, like for the last 3 or 4 days, Aniket, my husband, and myself kept going back and forth. Should we go, not go? Yes, no, maybe. But we have a meeting here, but we have, this meditation class here, but this, but that, but we really want to go. Trying to optimize all the different pieces of the puzzle. And it's not that easy because it's not like life is waiting for all those pieces to fall completely in place for you. I literally spent 3 days on this. And then after some agonizing back and forth, we decided, you know what, we're going to go. We're going to go on Thursday evening and come back on Sunday. It'll be really nice to get away. And guess what happened? When we made the decision and we started looking online for getting car rentals, the car rentals for this week were so expensive. In New York City, you couldn't get a car rental for I think less than $800, and that was just rental, no taxes, no insurance, nothing like that. And the decision became quite clear. Like, do we want to spend $1,000 to go for the weekend? Okay, especially when we can go for another weekend. And it made me realize, I'd spent 3 days going back and forth on whether we should go or not go. If only I had moved, made a decision one way or the other. Yes, let's go. And looked at car rentals, which was the next logical step. We would have known what the decision is and it would have been very clear. Or on the other side, just taking a decision saying, hey, you know what? This weekend it's not quite working out. Let's go another weekend. But it's amazing how we keep going back and forth on such an innocuous decision. It's not such a big decision, right? It's not a life-altering decision. And yet, even for something as small as should we go out for the weekend and not go out for the weekend, I promise you, we spent 3 days going back and forth on whether we should or should not. And it made me realize as an adult, we have to take so many decisions and they cause stress. So how do we go about making decisions? What are the different buckets of people potentially that navigate decision making? I was thinking about this a little bit. And I was thinking of like maybe 3 or 4 categories in how we make decisions. And you can figure out for yourself which of these categories you fall in, or maybe you move between these categories. So the first one is people who potentially have not grown up from the tendency of being a child, right? As children, all our decisions were made by our parents. And we're continuing with that mindset where at a very subtle level, under the guise of being, oh, you know what, this decision really doesn't matter, it's not that important, we outsource decision making to somebody else. And just remember, at a very subtle level, it is avoidance of taking responsibility. Now, it can be that it really doesn't matter to you when you're completely fine, but a lot of times that's not the case. Because if the decision doesn't go right, you will blame people who made the decision. At a very, very subtle level, you're going to start complaining. And complaining means you're not taking responsibility. I know of a friend, and she was seeing somebody, and her parents were completely against it. And she decided to go in line with what her parents wanted because she says, you know what, I want to keep my parents happy. And ultimately landed up getting married to somebody that her parents wanted her to. A few years into the marriage, things didn't work out well at all, to the point where they had to separate. And till date, she holds her parents responsible for her marriage and her marrying the person who she landed up marrying. And, at one level you can see that, but at another level, she had already made the decision many months back or many years back, I would say in this case, when she decided to let her parents make the decision. She had outsourced it, and at that point in time, a decision had already been made. And I think a lot of times we don't realize it. In a very subtle way, we've conceded responsibility, or we've made the decision to let somebody else make the decision, and then you have to carry the consequences because it was your decision to let somebody else make that decision for you. So that's number one. The second one is people who don't like staying in the indecisive place. Have you seen people like they quickly need to decide? They don't like the grays. Why are you going back and forth? It's not such a big deal. Decide and move on. Like, why are you wasting so much time? They don't like staying in the state of indecision at all. And it's so uncomfortable. And yes, making decision or that state of indecision is uncomfortable. And they want to move into comfort as quickly as possible. And a lot of times they will just move into action without really thinking of the consequences or weighing the pros and cons. I was at a coffee shop earlier this week, and there was a beautiful, I don't know whether it was a painting or a saying, a motto that they had there. And they said, the direction in which you run is far more important than the speed at which you're running. And for those of us who love to, quickly make a decision and move on because we hate sitting in the gray, just one piece of thought is just ensure that you have weighed a little bit of the pros and cons and you're running in the right direction rather than running really fast in the opposite direction. And the third category, which I think is where a lot of us might fall, is we go back and forth. We weigh the pros and cons, we try and optimize, and being a consultant, you kind of want to optimize 2 years and 3 years out. How will this decision play out? If this, then this. And just realize that life, you're making decisions based on today's information. And life is not static and you're not static. So no matter how much planning you do, no matter how many scenarios you run through, there will be things that you don't know. And life will have its own curveballs, it'll have its own realities that you may not have considered. There is no way we could have considered COVID 2 years back, right? So we just realized that no matter how much you prepare with the pros and cons, you will never get it 100% right. And the moment you know that, something in us eases off. Because the reason why we go back and forth so much on decision making is because we don't want it to be wrong. There's a little bit of fear that if the decision is wrong, it will have consequences, it'll have pain, it might have things that I don't like. Or on the other side, it might be, oh my God, another decision would have made me so much happier. I might have had so much more, whatever it is. So we oscillate between fear on one side, so pain avoidance on one side, and pleasure maximizing on the other, right? And that is the only thing that we're weighing back and forth. And if you knew, right, no matter how much you do, the decision can still be wrong, then it takes a little bit of the pressure away. Just move in action. Like, it helped me this week to just move in action, say, yes, I'm going. And when I looked at the reality of the situation, we completely landed at a different decision. So you don't know, just move, because in movement, certain things might get revealed, and then you can always pivot your decision. The second thing is something that a CEO told me recently. I was doing a meditation course for somebody who is the CEO of a company. And he said, Ruchika, in our company, it's absolutely okay to fail. It's absolutely okay to make mistakes. And even if you made a $50,000 mistake, just ensure that the lesson from that mistake is worth $100,000, because that's a great trade. And I loved it. It stayed with me. We don't want to make mistakes, but what we don't realize is the lessons that mistakes or lessons that failure offer us, right? It makes us a different person. We look at situations differently. We grow. And yes, sometimes growth can be painful, but that might be needed. So if you also looked at decisions as, okay, the worst case scenario is it does not do really well. It's a worst decision I make in my life. You would have learned something from it. So if you can hold on to the lesson From there, you will also realize, you know what, there isn't really a downside. The upside is things will be really well, things might go really well, I'll do really well. The downside is I would have learned a lesson. So in either case, it's a win-win. There isn't a win-lose. And the third thing is when the mind is reeling and stirring the pot and stirring the pot and stirring the pot, clarity is really tough, right? You know, when there's muddy water and you keep stirring it and stirring it and stirring it, it doesn't let the mud settle down. Similarly with our mind, when we keep going back and forth, pros and cons, we're stirring the muddy water. So just a few minutes of meditation, just a few minutes of stepping back, just a few minutes of quietening your mind, the decision will become clear because you would have touched something called the gut or the intuition. And normally decisions that come from there are much more life supporting, are things that are much more in line with where our life is supposed to go. So I cannot underscore enough how important it is to just for a few minutes, just for a few seconds sometimes too, just step away, take long deep breaths in and out, center yourself and let the voice come from inside rather than forcing yourself to come up with a decision. So those are a couple of things that I thought about this week as I was going back and forth on such an innocuous decision on whether we should go visit some friends and family or we shouldn't. I am looking. Hi, there's Renuka here, and I see my mom's here. It's good to see both of you. And one decision has the ability to change our lives. Yes, there are a lot of decisions that can change our life, and they do. For example, coming to this country has changed the complete flow of my life, the person you get married to. But just realize that a lot of these decisions can have U-turns. You know, Jeff Bezos says this really well. He says there are one-way doors and there are two-way doors. And one-way doors is you move in one direction and the door closes behind you. So for example, if you decide to have children and you have children, there is no undoing that. But a lot of decisions in life is actually two-way doors. We think they're one-way doors, but they're not really. So just know that yes, decisions can change your life, but we put far, far, far more emphasis on how much they can change our life because of the fear that we may have, a little bit of insecurity we may have. Any questions that you guys have for today? It's been good for me to ruminate on this, but if you have questions, I would love to hear from you, or even thoughts that you have. Archana, my mom-in-law is saying, I wish I'd heard this earlier. That's great. Calvin, you always have some really good questions. Can intuition be wrong? It's a great question. Intuition, I doubt is wrong. In my experience, it's not been wrong. But whether it's an intuition or a desire, that difference you will know as you meditate more and more. How much of it is truly an intuition versus your mind perceiving it to be an intuition, but it's actually it's a desire guised as intuition. So that's what my experience has been. What should we do when there's a conflict between the head and the heart? Great question. In my experience, when there's a conflict between the head and the heart, it's the heart that wins. And I'll go back to something that I learned. So I have been trained in advertising, and I remember one of the first things that we were taught when we were creating ads and 2 years of understanding advertising is all decisions in life normally are emotional. We just give people rational hooks so they can feel good about the decisions. So head or heart, in my experience, the heart wins, and we find ways to rationalize it. So that's another thing to kind of watch. You know, just watch. Have you already made the decision inside and are, rationalizing back and forth, or are you truly not decided? But in my experience, normally between the head and the heart wins hands down because emotions are so much stronger than the intellect. Most of our decisions have been made without much thought, but in hindsight, they have worked out. Yes, it all works out. And even those that you think may not have worked out have made us who we are today. We would not be who we are without all the events that have happened in our life. And those events have happened because of certain decisions we have or have not made. So, God, these are great questions. Human nature is to procrastinate, and that also ties to decision making at times. Is that good nature? I think procrastination comes from a couple of things. Procrastination comes from either, again, fear of making decisions or just laziness, right? You procrastinate about a task that you think doesn't give you joy. So, for example, for me, filing the taxes, doing all the paperwork, it feels like a chore because I don't enjoy it. So literally, I wait till the 10th of April to collect all my papers, go to my CPA, because to me that is not enjoyable. The mind constantly wants to maximize pleasure. And any activity that we think is not pleasurable, we kind of put in the back burner. But you know what? It's okay. It's better to get it done, because just remember, in procrastination, a part of your mind is constantly saying, I need to do it. I need to do it. I still need to do it. And that's taking away a lot of energy. So it's better to just get it done so that noise and chatter stops and you can truly be in the moment and kind of be in flow. But it's a great question, Calvin. Probably we thought we didn't have a choice at the point, Pravana. Yes. It can feel like that we don't have choice, but we always have choice. Even when we're not making a decision, even the decision not to make a decision is the decision. So just remember that. So I'm just going to leave you, because it's been over 15 minutes. I'm going to leave you with just a couple of things for this week. One is figure out in which bucket you're falling. Are you the kind of person who's outsourcing decision making? Are you the kind of person who quickly makes a decision because you don't like the discomfort of being in indecision? Or are you the person who agonizes and goes back and forth trying to perfect the decision? And for all three categories, I would say just make a decision this week. Could be small or big. Just make it. If you're the kind of person who outsources, you make it yourself. If you're the person who makes it so quickly without really thinking, think a little bit. And for the third category, just know that no matter where you land, you will be supported. Yeah. So on that, have a great weekend. I know it's Easter, Passover, so celebrations all over. And I'll see you again next Friday on something else. Bye.